right, guys, before we get started today, I want to let you know that you can try YouTube TV for free and get access to 85 plus live TV channels, unlimited DVR space, and game day features like Key Plays. Just be sure to record the game and then use the Key Plays view right in the YouTube TV app to catch up on all the highlights you may have missed. Plus, you can cancel at any time with no hidden fees. That's a touchdown. YouTube TV, try it free, new users only, terms apply, cancel anytime. What's up, guys? Welcome into a Combine edition of Chargers Weekly, powered by YouTube TV. Alongside Matt Money Smith, Chris Hayre here with you from California. Money in Indy, getting set for another, Combine Live this morning? What?
Combine Live, yeah, it'll be, actually, Combine's in prime time now. So before I'd be up at crack of dawn, I'm from the West Coast, so it would basically be 2 a.m. Pacific time, and to work out and then get over to Lucas Oil by 4 a.m. Pacific time to get all settled in for our broadcast. And, we'd get rolling at like 7 a.m. Pacific. But no more. Now prime time affair. So we're on 3 to 4 Pacific on all your NFL digital platforms. So NFL.com, NFL YouTube channel, the app. You'll be able to watch me, Bucky, and Lance get ready to preview what's, an awful sexy group today: quarterbacks, wide receivers, tight ends, especially those wide receivers. A lot of people getting excited about.
That's a heck of a trio, you, Bucky, and Lance, breaking it all down. So why don't you set the scene for me, man? How's it been in Indy these first few days?
Yeah, it's been great. Well, first of all, the weather's been incredibly warm. I've been here when it's been -10 wind chill, and, sleet is sideways peppering you in the face when you're walking your 2 blocks from Lucas Oil to your hotel and you feel like it's 2,000 miles. So to be out 2 nights ago at midnight to go hang out and have a pop or two with somebody, and I'm walking in a t-shirt, it's a little weird, but whatever. We'll take it, man. So it's been really nice. Yesterday and day before, a ton of press conferences. So it was over at the convention center, kind of hanging out to watch Tom and Brandon yesterday, Tom the day before, and obviously all the other coaches and GMs, and doing the rounds, talking to a couple of our future opponents who were set up here, their broadcast, doing interviews, waxing poetic about the Chargers. So it's been a lot of fun these first 2 days.
So a little bit later on, I talked to Mike Renner of Pro Football Focus, breaking down some of these prospects. We'll play that interview. But Money, I want to talk about Tom Telesco and Brandon Staley, their pressers late in the day. I think those guys were like the last to go on Tuesday and Wednesday. Yeah. Anything significant that you took from Tom and Brandon these last 2 days?
No, I think a lot of it. Look, they never say much. The coaches and GMs, they're speaking in generalities. They're never going to show their hand. A couple will say some interesting things, but for the most part, I think it's what we've been discussing here these last 4 weeks. And especially yesterday with Brandon kind of talking, and then this was also something that Tom brought up, and I think it was Popper that asked Tom the question, and I don't know if he doubled down and asked Staley as well, but something that we've been talking about, and that's that maybe Asante is better off inside. Now, Staley seemed to not feel that way. He seemed to think that, well, I shouldn't say that. He kind of pointed out that Asante played really well on the outside, and they had Chris, but I think you saw an indication from both of them in indicating, now that he's got a year under his belt, maybe he's more comfortable moving to that slot position. I think that sort of echoes what we've been talking about. That's one thing. Two is, Tom normally, if he's going to extend someone or pick up an option, I think it indicates that in a general way. So when asked about Tillery, that he said, there was really kind of no comment. I think that kind of signals what we're all thinking, and that's that, Tillery, that Jerry's got a little bit more to prove to this team. If he's going to stick around, as opposed to, you drafted a guy in the first round, so you automatically pick up his option. That number would probably just be way too big, considering I think there's still some questions about, how, because look, Jerry's shown great flashes, but at the same time in this scheme, certainly struggled in run defense. And I think they're probably going to want to see a little bit more of that before they decide to keep him around long term.
Staley, when talking about Asante, he said the 2 positions on defense that they really need to get better at and take a look at are obviously up front, which we've talked about, and in corners. He said we're always looking for corners. So
yeah.
yeah, I don't want to give too much away in Mike's interview when he breaks down like the depth of this class and where you can get value. But I feel like free agency may be a big avenue to explore the cornerback market. And as far as up front, we've talked about it every single week about just being able to stop the run and getting after the quarterback. And there's a lot of really good edge rushers in this draft class. A lot of guys who I think could make this team better. But the quarterback position, you know, obviously we got Mike Davis on one side, Asante, let's say he plays inside. You're going to have to get a couple dudes, whether it's in free agency or the draft, that you can really rely on to play in 2022. So the fact that he didn't really mention the linebacking core and really focused on the secondary and the defensive line, Staley, who I'm talking about, that was intriguing to me.
Well, you know, again, I think it's stuff that we've been kicking around here since the end of the season, you know, and look, they're hard to find. It's to me, you know, if quarterback is number one, corner is number two, and toughest thing to do in sports. I mean, you're working backwards. The guy you're opposite is a premier athlete. He knows exactly what he's going to do. And you're trying to figure out what he's going to do. I mean, it's incredibly hard. So to find a great one is going to cost you. You're either going to get lucky. It's going to cost you significant draft capital, or it's going to cost you significant salary capital, or maybe both, like in the case of Jalen Ramsey and the Rams, 2 first-round picks, and he's the highest paid corner in the league, and he's the best corner in the league. I mean, that's the kind of stuff we're talking about. So, like, if I were to guess, I think they would probably, I think free agency for corner would not be a break the bank style signing. I think it's just I think Tom would be a little afraid of that. It's like, hey, if this guy's as good as this contract is, why is he leaving? That just teams don't let top shelf. You know, we know that Jalen just the situation was untenable. He just did not get along with Doug Marrone. Just got sideways on him in Jacksonville, and that's why he had to leave. But I think when you're talking about, you know, Jackson, I mean, I think there's some interesting names out there, but I don't think it'd be a big money signing. I think it's more likely that they invest big draft capital in the corner market because it is a pretty deep class, and I think you probably feel good about someone that slipped. You know, if Stingley slips because of injury, if Sauce, I don't think Gardner's going to slip, but if McDuffie slips, although he's starting to fly up boards and starting to get some traction here, or Booth is there and you really like him, I think that to me makes more sense just because of how much money, you know, the elite guys, JC Jackson thinks he's supposed to get paid is going to cost. And I think it's more likely that the defensive tackle market is a little more friendly when it comes to money and trying to fill that spot through free agency as opposed to with draft capital. That makes sense.
Yeah. No, I think the cornerbacks, especially in first, second round, would be a position to keep your eye on just because of some of these guys that you mentioned, like McDuffie flying up the board. And, you know, what Tom was talking about on Tuesday offensively, saying that I need to make sure we don't take a step back offensively. I really like that because, you know, you can't just bring the same dudes back and expect to have the same results. You have to continue to bolster the offensive line, find weapons, whether it's in free agency or in the draft. And, you know, he did mention that running back 2 position, which we've talked about all season long, saying we can't have the production at that spot that we had this year and expect to get better. Like he needs to find whether it's a vet or a guy in the draft that can really take some pressure off Austin. And, you know, we've been singing that the last few weeks. I really think if they can do that, man, it makes life so much easier on Justin. And I think just continuing to bolster the weapons on the outside. You know, we don't know what's going to happen with Mike yet. You know, we're not sure if it's going to be a franchise deal, if he's going to walk, if it's going to be a long-term deal. But regardless, getting another weapon, and I don't know if you do it in the first round, but if you can find a guy in the first 2 or 3 rounds to make life easier on Justin, whether it's at the tight end position or wide receiver, I think that's what Tom's talking about. It's just not taking a step back offensively.
To me, it's a bit of a preemptive strike to the fan base through the media. And we, you know, how many times can we say it? He is a best player available draft guy. He just is. So if Treylon Burks is sitting there and they've got him as top 5 talent in this draft, and because wide receiver is such a what do we need to fill out that room type of position, if for whatever reason he slides and they take a wide receiver at 17, or we talked about Olave, or if Drake London for whatever reason. So I think it's him saying, hey man, just because we were a top 5 offense and a bottom 5 defense doesn't mean that we got to draft defense in the first round. Doesn't mean we got to draft defense in the first 2 or 3. Right? Just we're going to do what's best for the team, and you can still win games by scoring a lot of points in this league. And you saw what the Bengals were able to do through free agency. I mean, they completely remade that defense, not through the draft, but by signing players, by bringing in Von Bell, by bringing in Trey Hendrickson. That's the way they went about it. So, I think that may be sort of what he was intimating. Like, just because that side of the ball is good doesn't mean we're not going to take, O-line in round 1, wide receiver in round 2, and let's just say, Walker's sitting there in round 3, Walker in round 3, and be like, whatever, man, let's go out and average 35 instead of 28 next year. So to me, that's at least what I took away from it, is that him reminding people we're taking the best guy on the board. We're not drafting for position.
Yeah. Offensively too, man, let's just say like Jameson Williams is available at 17. Like he may be the best wide receiver in the draft. Like I know he's coming off a major injury.
ACL. But it's a clean ACL. He'll be back in the middle of the season. Right. He's explosive. He's got that, I hate to use the name, but it's that Tyreek Hill level of burst, where he may be, running step for step with a corner, but he catches the ball and all of a sudden he's just gone. It's that second gear. So, I think, that, and that's something that Brandon Staley talked about yesterday. He was asked about that speed receiver, and I thought he made a great point. He knows what he's talking about, but he said, you got to remember, it's not just drafting a guy that clocks a 4.29 or a 4.35. It's that he's a legitimate threat, that when that guy takes off, you're putting pressure on the defense, not someone that takes off and you're like, 50-50, he catches the ball, 50-50, he's able to adjust midair, 50-50, he's able to track. You know what I mean? That doesn't matter. It's an elite player that can do that. But we were talking about it yesterday, Lance and I doing some work together, and he brought up, like, look, that when you're talking about looking for that speed, and people are excited about the athleticism of Garrett Wilson, it's like, just go back and look at DeAndre Hopkins' numbers and what he looked like going through drills. Like, you can dominate in so many different ways. So look, I think everybody's feeling good about Josh Palmer, and they got him in the 3rd round. It's a deep position. It's going to continue to be a deep position just because of where the game has gone and how many of these guys are coming out of college just with exceptional talent.
Yeah, you take this draft out of it. You bring up a great point about Palmer, and really, I'd say the same thing with Asante and Rashaan, because I think obviously Rashaan was a second-team All-Pro, but he's going to get better. It's scary. Yeah. He's going to get better. Asante's going to get better. Palmer's going to get better. So the guys who contributed last year, Neiman, he'll get better. He'll be a stalwart on special teams. Guys who were new to the league last year, we know what Rashaan did and what his impact was, but I think some of those guys from last year's class are going to make a bigger impact this year. And it leads me to what Brandon said about being a complete team. He said that right after the season, but he also said being a deep team and finding depth. And I think that's going to be so important, is to continue to build out this roster and be as deep as you could possibly be in all the positions that, we saw that Texans game, where the COVID game, where, depth was tested. If they can be a deeper team, especially at positions where they're going to need guys to step up late in year, injuries, whatever the case may be. I mean, it's a great opportunity, this draft, because you have so many picks, but to have the cap space in free agency too, to just fill out the roster, not just starters, but guys who are going to be rotational players and will have an impact on the game in some form or fashion.
Yeah, and you can't argue with it. It's 100% true. The problem is, it's the hardest thing to find.
Yeah.
Depth is the hardest thing to come up with in the league. And, with the expansion of the practice squads, it's helped a lot because you get a much longer look at more of these guys, and you hope that one pops, like a Mike Davis, who was essentially a perfect example of that. But think about how many practice squad guys essentially were on the field, guys that were shuttled back and forth, from the, Fehoko, Forrest Merrill, Tavon Campbell. Like the list was extensive, to some degree. Storm Norton. I mean, Michael Schofield was signed off the street. So and he was a starting guard and he played well. Like you just get lucky, in that case with depth. So he's absolutely right. It's just very hard to do. It's draft, develop your 5th, 6th, 7th round guys, your undrafted free agents. They're able to become a little bit more than just special teams contributors. And I think, look, it's something we see across the board with every team, and I mean, when you looked at the Raiders, the game that the Chargers played in week 18, I mean, look who was out there. It was Roderick Teamer and Brandon Faison, 2 practice squad guys from the Chargers that Gus plucked because they knew the system and they were so thin with all of their injuries. You just plugged them in. Were they good? No, but they were bodies that knew the system. I mean, your depth will always be tested. And I think the Chargers done a very good job. We talk about how many years in a row an undrafted free agent makes the roster. We've seen guys, Fehoko, I think, is a perfect example of someone who's played at a really solid level. Joe Gaziano, at a nice level, at a roster, an active rosterable level, if that's a word or a phrase, to come off the practice squad. So they're going to have to continue to get better. And I think of all positions, it's the secondary that he's really talking about, because man, that was a thin group last year and really got beat to heck.
All right, Money, let's get to my interview with Mike Renner of Pro Football Focus, and we'll talk on the other side. All right, always enjoy having Mike Renner, Pro Football Focus, on around this time of year. Mike, in Indy, let's just start with this, man. Why don't you set the scene for us in Indianapolis as the Combine set to get underway?
It's back. I mean, after a year off, it feels like we never even left. It's about the same as ever. It's a zoo. You'll see, a top QB prospect walking past you one moment, and then you'll see, a free agent trying to get signed the next moment. It's a fun scene here down in India.
So if you look at this draft class, where would you start in terms of strengths?
I think the edge rusher class is very strong, and it's deep. It has the top end talent of guys like Aiden Hutchinson from Michigan, who might be the number 1 overall pick. Kayvon Thibodeau is probably somewhere in the top 10. And then it has just depth. Like, there's 12 guys in this edge class in the top 50 players on PFF's board. So there's a lot to like there. And I'd also add that I really like this linebacker class as well. I think it's one of the deeper linebacker classes, maybe the deepest since we started grading at PFF, where there's probably going to be 2 or 3 first rounders, but I think there's going to be about half dozen more in the second round come off the board. I really like the versatility and sort of body types in this linebacker class.
The Chargers are in such an interesting position at number 17 because they could go in a variety of directions with that. You can get another weapon for Justin Herbert. You can get a guy to plug the run like Davis in Georgia. You can get an edge rusher depending on what happens with Uchenna Nwosu, an offensive lineman, maybe a right tackle. At 17, a lot of different options. What do you think the Chargers should do at that spot there?
I think the board's going to set up nice for them, and everyone's plugging Jordan Davis in there, and he's a safe pick. He's going to be a good run stuffer, but like, there's run stuffers in free agency. There's run stuffers in the 3rd and 4th round that you can find. They might be as good as him, but like, I don't think they need a world beater there necessarily. Whereas I think you can get a real deal difference maker in this class at the receiver position. And I think that's one where I would highlight that if they could get someone like a Jameson Williams or a Chris Olave, someone with some speed in there that can get open deep, that it could take you. I mean, you see what happened with the Bengals this past year and how high that offense could push because of the playmakers they had. I mean, just imagine Justin Herbert with a similar caliber of explosive playmakers. That's where my head's at if I'm Chargers GM looking at this draft, thinking, man, how do we take the next step? That's where I'm looking.
I'm trying to envision an offense too, where the Chargers have so much cap space. You could franchise Mike Williams, let's say, right? So you have Keenan Allen, you have Mike Williams, you have Austin Eckler, who's all over the field. And then you add a guy like Jameson Williams or Chris Olave to that mix. Those guys, Jameson Williams probably would have been maybe wide receiver 1 had he not gotten hurt. Where do you see him going? Is 17 a pretty viable area for him to get drafted?
Yeah, to me, I mean, draft stock wise, very reminiscent of someone like Jeffrey Simmons, who coming out of Mississippi State towards ACL in January was probably a top 10 to top 15 pick prior, still goes 19th overall. And obviously, I don't think the Titans are looking back with any sort of reservations. One of the best DTs in the NFL right now. So I do think that's where my head's at with James Williams. And obviously, like, you got a lot of time between now and the actual draft to vet that injury and vet his recovery. But if he's on schedule, and that'll be 4 months after, I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be worth 17th overall pick. That's a guy I would run the card in if I'm the Chargers.
What do you think that would do to this Chargers offense that was already pretty prolific with Justin Herbert in his second season, to have another guy who could stretch the field? And they've had some guys like Tyron Johnson, his rookie year, Herbert's rookie year, and Jalen Guyton. But to get a burner to stretch the field, knowing that you have another big play guy, potentially Mike Williams, and then just the route running ability of Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler really doing it all. I mean, where do you think that could take the Chargers offense?
Yeah, and like a guy that you would want to throw screens to. Like, they pumped a good deal with the Mike Williams underneath, and he made some plays, but like, he's not that home run hitter in that regard in the screen game or in the underneath game. He's still a true possession type of wide receiver. So I think you just look at Justin Herbert's strengths and where he wins and what he's capable of, and it is putting the ball down the field as good as anyone can in the NFL. So any guy who can get open down the field as well as anyone in the NFL would be, match made in heaven. So it could just add that explosive element that we saw not be there far too often for the Chargers, where they had to put together drive after drive after drive of 10 plus plays to sort of ease that pressure on Justin Herbert to one throw and score sort of stuff. I think would take that offense into that upper echelon of, that can compete with the Chiefs, that can compete with the top offenses in the NFL.
To just keep talking about this offense, I've mentioned Austin Eckler a couple of times, and one of the topics that's come up this offseason is just that running back 2 position. They didn't really get anything behind Austin Eckler. And I've said this so many times in this podcast, I don't consider Austin Eckler a running back. He's this offensive weapon that you could put everywhere. The top tier running backs, like, I still contend if you bring in, a guy that you can get maybe early in the second round, like something similar to what Jonathan Taylor was a few years ago, and put that type of running back behind Justin Herbert, you can really bring this offense up another notch. Who are some of those guys that may be able to fit that bill in the second round, let's say?
Yeah, the two guys, probably only 2 guys I'd really even consider in the second round in this class. And that's Kenneth Walker from Michigan State, the guy who was, I think, he meant at the Heisman ceremony, but he carried that offense and carried them to wins over Michigan and stuff like that. He wasn't supposed to do what he did behind that Michigan State offensive line. So I think he's a guy who, like, this running back class has kind of gotten poo-pooed as not great, but like, to me, he's right up there with the guys from last year's class, whether it's, Javonte Williams, Travis Etienne, or Najee Harris, in terms of just like his ability. So I'm a big fan of his. And then Breece Hall from Iowa State. 3 years, massive production, touchdown machine. He can be your goal line guy, short yardage guy. They love to obviously go for those sort of situations, and he'd probably be a little bit more built for that type of role than an Austin Eckler is.
Flip it to defense. We talked about the defensive ends and the edge rushers and the linebacking class after the first round. What about the corner class? How would you assess this? The Chargers, I think, you drafted Asante Samuel Jr. last year. There was talk about maybe playing him inside. Chris Hayre Jr., I think, is a free agent. So they need to upgrade the secondary, and I'm curious as to what the cornerback position looks like, maybe even beyond that first round.
Yeah, so this cornerback class, how I kind of view it is there's a group of 3 at the top guys in Derek Stingley, Sauce Gardner, Trent McDuffie, Sauce Gardner from Cincinnati, Trevor Guthrie from Washington, same with LSU, that you really want one of those guys. If you want a guy who's going to see the field next year for you, make an impact, you want one of those guys. Yeah. I think Andrew Booth from Clemson is a guy who could be in the mix if like that's your first round pick, who's solid, but I'm not sure he's quite as NFL ready as those other three. And then that's kind of like it in terms of guys I feel good about in this cornerback class. I don't love the depth on day two, unlike last year where, you could find an Asante Samuel Jr., where the Chargers did, who could be an impact player from right out the gate. I don't think that's this cornerback class. I just don't see a lot of guys in that mix, second or third round that I want to throw to the fire that I think are good options right out the gate. So I'm not a massive fan of, like I said, this cornerback class after that top three.
A couple more for you, Mike. The fact that Rashaan Slater came on the way he did, second team All-Pro. I mean, if you give Offensive Rookie of the Year to an offensive lineman, I think he would have been in contention there. Yeah. What did you think of just how he came on and really not playing at all at Northwestern the year prior to be able to have the season that he had?
Yeah, it was wild for a number of reasons. And like you mentioned, to have not played football, and now it's not like he was sitting on his hands and doing nothing, obviously, but like to not like to face, oftentimes if you don't face good competition, it's like it's difficult to get better, seemingly difficult to get better. And he obviously disproved that to step in the NFL right away and shut down guys like Chase Young. So I do think that I was going to say making a lot of teams that picked ahead of him regretting it, but like everyone that was picked ahead of him was good too. Like there's a lot of players at the top of last year's class that were elite for rookies at their respective positions, but the Chargers have to be thanking their lucky stars that it was such a loaded class, because players like that do not drop to the middle of the first round every year.
Man, I tell you, I would have been completely fine with the Chargers moving up to get Slater, and the fact that they had to just sit back and chill, and at number 13 he becomes available was wild to me. Hey, final thing for you: Chargers 9-8 last year. They have a bunch of picks in this draft. After seeing what they did, their strengths, their weaknesses, what do you think they need to accomplish in this draft to get them in the conversation in the AFC? When you have the quarterback, that's half the battle. Now they have to build around him and, of course, improve upon the defense last year that had some tough moments.
Yeah, like I mentioned, I think an explosive playmaker as a wide receiver would go a long way. You need that offense to be, that's your bread and butter. Like if you're going to go to the Super Bowl, if you're going to win it all, it's going to be where Justin Herbert takes you. So getting him the best situation possible. I think that, and then I'll add, I do think they need probably a defensive tackle. But again, like I said, that's not a position you necessarily need in the first round or even in the draft, but they do desperately need a defensive tackle and a linebacker that can play the run at a little higher level than they had last year. Where they find that, like I said, linebacker class, that would be a great spot in the second round of this draft to find a linebacker. So would not surprise me at all if that's where they went.
Love it. Mike, always appreciate the insight, man. I hope you have a great time in Indy. I'm a little jealous I'm not there, but, there's always next year.
Yeah, for sure. See, hopefully next year, Chris, man. Thanks for having me on, buddy.
All right, guys, a quick break to let you know that you can try YouTube TV for free and get access to 85 plus live TV channels, unlimited DVR space, and game day features like Key Plays. Just be sure to record the game and then use the Key Plays view right in the YouTube TV app. Catch up on all the highlights you may have missed. Plus, you can cancel at any time with no hidden fees. That's a touchdown. YouTube TV, try it free, new users only, terms apply, cancel anytime. All right, always love catching up with Mike around this time of year. And listen, everybody has an opinion on the class and how deep it is. Buddy, what are your kind of thoughts on some of these players? What I love about the Combine is you get to hear these interviews and hear them actually talk to the media as part of this process. Did anything kind of stand out to you this week?
Because I'm covering for NFL Network, so it's sort of maybe just non-Charger big picture.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is trying to figure out what this quarterback class is. This is the week where people start to sell quarterbacks. Like, yeah, I know we came to Indianapolis saying there were no true first round talents at the position. And a lot of times you leave Indianapolis saying, I got 3 quarterbacks going in the first round now. So I thought, Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis did a really good job of kind of establishing themselves as, that potential first round selection, but unfortunately Matt Corral's not going to be able to work out just because that ankle's not quite healed. Because I think he's certainly in that conversation as a borderline first round pick. So that was interesting. I think there's a lot of buzz. It starts with the fact that he stands out when he's sitting at the, on the podium at the lectern, and Greg Dulcich is talking, and you see that giant head of hair kind of flopping around. People get excited. He looks different. Yeah. And he's a Bruin, but he's going to put on a show. And I think he's got a shot to come out of here in the conversation as the number one tight end, just because of how athletic and how explosive he is, and the fact that he's got the build. He can probably, he's like a solid 250. He can probably put another 5-8 pounds on that frame and still be totally fine. So that's going to come out of here. The offensive linemen are fighting. It's going to be a fight. You got 5 different names that some people have at the top of their list, which means you could have a tackle slide to the Chargers at 17 that otherwise maybe in other drafts, if it were a little bit of a more thin position, wouldn't have zero chance of finding himself there. So whatever your pleasure is, if it's Neal to have the giant frame, if it's Ekwonu, just a high ceiling, the incredible athleticism, Cross, who's kind of more your standard technique pass blocker, even though I would never touch him because he comes from Mike Leach's system, and that scares the hell out of me. Yeah. You have Penny, who's just like the nasty, beat the hell out of you guys. So I think that's going to show itself. That's going to be an interesting battle. And of course, between the wide receivers and corners, just the exceptional athletes, I think they're really going to kind of do battle out there to try to be those top 10 picks. It's going to be a lot of fun.
I forgot who said it, but you see all this potential movement among Rodgers and Wilson, and it likely won't happen, right? So these quarterbacks who everybody said, oh, this is a weak quarterback class, they start looking a little bit better, right? As you get closer to April, they're like, okay, well, Kenny Pickett, first round talent.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Chris, because it's true. Because we've been monitoring, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Kirk Cousins, Deshaun Watson, and then you come here and it's Aaron's working on a deal with the Packers. Pete Carroll says zero chance Russell Wilson's leaving. I don't know what's going to happen with Kyler Murray. That's the one that's super weird. I can't wrap my head around that one at all. Now that Larry Fitzgerald's dad's entered the conversation, you've got Kirk Cousins.
I missed that layer of it. What did he say?
Oh yeah, Larry Fitzgerald's dad said, yeah, word is he's spoiled and selfish and doesn't act like a pro. It's like, thanks, Dad, appreciate it. But I guess technically his dad's in the football media, so whatever. He's got a right to. Everybody's got a right to say it. But yeah, why not talk about it if you've got those sources and you're comfortable saying it? The Miami Dolphins and Mike McDaniel said Tua is their guy. So it certainly feels like, and even Lovie Smith said, look, we got to have patience with Deshaun, and that's because they're still trying to figure this mess out. So I think all that movement means, to your point, Broncos can't go into 2022 with Mitch Trubisky as their quarterback. That's just not going to work for their
Mitch is already he's been the hot name of this week.
That's
right?
What I mean, it's that can't happen. So that may mean Kenny Pickett or Willis, or maybe Howell. You trade back into the back end of the first round to get Corral or Howell or however that were Ritter. I mean, whatever. That is starting to look like it's going to make more sense. And same with the Saints, and same with when Bruce Arians is saying that Blaine Gabbert set up to have the best season of his career, it's like, dude, come on, man. Bruce, watch this guy for 12 years. It's not going to just change in year 13, man. That ain't how it works. So I think that's what's going to lead to quarterbacks ended up. And it's great to be a quarterback, man.
It's great to have a quarterback too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The Chargers do not have to worry about any of this stuff, because if you don't have a quarterback in the NFL, you have no shot. One of the things that I always find interesting is the new coaches going up to the podium and getting to learn, how they operate, how they speak with the media. And, in the AFC West, obviously Josh McDaniels and Nathaniel Hackett, two new faces to the AFC West. So, they're bringing in new programs in this division. Obviously, Andy Reid's been established for a long time, but I think if you're a Chargers fan, it's good to have a year under your belt with Brandon Staley, knowing what to expect. I think he has a really clear idea of the personnel that's currently on the roster. And who else needs to, there we go. Where we go?
There we go.
Are you showing me all the art?
Sorry.
Are you showing me all the artwork in your hotel room?
Yeah. There's my hotel room. There's the artwork there. And there's the artwork there. So yeah, there it is. Blank walls, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry about that. The stand fell down on me there. You know what? I thought McDaniels had a great presser. I was really impressed. He always carries kind of this arrogance, it feels like, to him. And that was not the case at all. There was, some fun, a little bit of self-deprecation in there. And credit to Tom Telesco from NFL Network, when he joined NFL Now, he just put the screws to him. He's like, can you tell me right now today that week 1, Derek Carr's your starter? And he said, absolutely. So, it's something we've been speculating. Now, look, he can say that he's the coach, general manager, but they're going to work in concert, he and Ziegler, but like there's still no contract extension. He's still in the last year. So that part of it's going to be interesting. But I think that speaks to the other thing we were talking about. The Raiders were mentioned in the Aaron Rodgers, Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson conversation. So it looks like they're going to go with Derek Carr.
Midwest money these next 10 days, right?
Yeah. Here till what is today? I'm here for another week. I'll be flying home a week from tonight after doing the first 2 days of the Big Ten tournament. Yeah, wonderful.
Fun though. Is Juwan back for the tourney?
Yes, he was. Phil Martinelli was just been doing the remainder of the regular season, I believe, and Juwan will be back for the tournament. So that ought to be interesting. So who he wants to pick a fight with next? Hopefully it won't be me. That would not go well for me.
How about that play-by-play guy who's talking a little slick?
Exactly right. Come over here. You want to mess with a guy who's 6'10"? No, I don't. I know where you grew up, Juwan. I'm good, man. There's a couple neighborhoods over from me. I'm good.
Love it. All right, man. Always a pleasure. Thanks for doing this. I know it's been time zones and your show. Tune in,
man.
See Bucky, see Lance as this combine gets started. For Money, I'm Chris. This has been Chargers Weekly, powered by YouTube TV.